Hi everyone, welcome back to my series, The Decades of Action Challenge. Decades of Action Challenge, one of the two. I am going through basically the choices by a writer named Tom Breihan for most important action movie of each year, starting with 1968 and moving towards the present, about 50 years of action movies, the most important and influential action movie of each year. Going forward. This series was inspired by a couple of guys who here on YouTube are called Razor Wire and Forkerball. They've been doing a series called the Epic Film Challenge, on which they go through a book called 1001 Movies You Must See Before You Die. Mine is only 50 movies long, so it's a lot less intense. But it's going to go the whole year. I started in January and I'll be wrapping up in December. One movie every Friday. Breihan, of course, is writing this series for avclub.com. The series is called A History of Violence. He's on, I think, 1999 right now. Just this morning he posted his article on The Matrix, which he considers the most important action movie of 1999. Obviously, yeah. Not a lot of doubt about that one for me. I was trying to guess what some of these were, and actually he teased the next article he's going to write about in 2 weeks. He's going to post his article on the most important action movie of 2000, and I guessed that it would be Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and I was right. I guessed correctly, so that's great. I think probably 2001 is going to be the first Fast and Furious movie. We'll see, in 2 weeks when he writes about Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, he'll mention what the next movie is going to be, and so I'll be looking for that as well. Anyway, as you can see by the title, I am on 1982. And since Breihan considers The Road Warrior, the second Mad Max movie with Mel Gibson, to be a 1981 movie, because it was released in Australia originally in 81, his choice is First Blood, which is the first Rambo movie. First movie in which Sylvester Stallone played John Rambo. This is actually a movie based on a novel. And it's produced by the same guys who did Total Recall and Terminator 2, went on to do those movies with Arnold Schwarzenegger. Arnold actually had Conan the Barbarian come out this same year, but Breihan's choice was First Blood. And the interesting thing about the Rambo movies for me is that I never really wanted to see any of these movies all that much. I wasn't really interested in the character of John Rambo. He's just basically a guy who goes to other countries and mows down all the bad army of bad people in other countries and maybe rescues a few people, but doesn't otherwise seem to have a thought in his head. And I actually watched these movies in reverse order. I haven't actually seen all of the most recent Rambo movie, which I think came out in 2008 or 2007. That one was simply called Rambo. He did a movie about Rocky called simply Rocky Balboa, but this one's just called Rambo, but it's the fourth movie. The one that came out prior to that, Rambo 3, came out in 88, and that was actually the first one that I saw. I think I was in high school at the time. It happened to be on TV. I thought I'd watch it. Don't remember a whole lot about it. I think it takes place in Afghanistan. Haven't seen it since. Just Rambo 3. And then, years later, I saw Rambo 2, which is called Rambo First Blood Part 2. And then, now, I've finally seen the first Rambo movie. So I basically saw them in reverse order. Not that I have retained a lot about any of these movies. I only saw Rambo 2 about maybe 5 years ago. I'm not really sure when it was exactly, but we were doing this theme on the collab channel I'm a member of, 80s Week. We were all doing movies from the 80s. I'm like, you know what, I've never seen Rambo 2. I remember kids talking about it at the time. Let's see, I think I was, well, this would have been 85, so I would have been about to start 8th grade, maybe. Anyway, this, when I got together with some kids in the summer, they were like, oh my goodness, Rambo, it's so amazing. And I didn't know anything about it, really. I mean, I'd seen, the character, pictures of the character, really. But again, it just seemed like this muscle-bound guy who goes in and doesn't really talk much, doesn't really think much. He just goes in, kills bad guys, whatever. And as it turns out, Rambo is, a Green Beret, a former Green Beret, and now he's, basically waging one-man wars against, armies of bad guys, dictators, terrorists, things like that. The most recent Rambo movie took place in Burma. And he laid waste to a bunch of people there. Like I said, I didn't know a whole lot about the character. turns out, the beginning of First Blood, the very first film, Rambo's basically out of the service. He's just sort of wandering around. He doesn't live anywhere in particular. He's kind of homeless. He's just basically got a duffel bag full of his things, which he carries around with him. He arrives in this small town in Washington State, where he's looking up one of the men in his unit and finds out that he's already died. He died a couple of years ago. He got cancer because of Agent Orange. He was exposed to Agent Orange. And he is, not happy about that, obviously. So he's sort of milling around, isn't really sure where to go or what to do next. And he happens to come across the sheriff of this little town, who's played by Brian Dennehy. And Dennehy takes one look at Rambo, and he doesn't look very clean, and his hair is too long, and he's like, I don't want this guy hanging around. He's obviously a drifter. He doesn't know anything about this guy, but he takes it upon himself to give him a ride, and he gives him a ride basically to the edge of town, and he says, here you go, just keep on walking, have a nice day. You're not welcome here. He won't even let him, have a meal at the local diner. Rambo doesn't like this very much. So as the sheriff is driving away, he turns around and starts walking right back to the town. Unfortunately, the sheriff spots him doing this and arrests him. He charges him with vagrancy. I don't really know why that's a crime, being a person who doesn't have a lot of money or doesn't have a place to live. Apparently that's a crime. And also resisting arrest, which he really didn't do. And he had a knife on him, a really, really big hunting knife, which he, he just sort of carries around and have. He doesn't have any guns or anything like that. He's just got this knife. What do you use this for? He says, for hunting. So he takes him down to the station, and the other cops there, they don't like him either. They don't like the look of him. They think that men should be clean cut and have short hair and what have you, and they're very, very eager to rough him up and give him a hard time. And they rough him up a little bit too much, and he sort of flashes back to being tortured as a prisoner of war back in Vietnam, and he sort of busts loose. He loses it. He starts beating everybody up. He escapes the police station, grabs a guy off of a motorcycle, and all the cops chase him into the forest. Now, when I started this movie, I figured most of it would just take place in the forest, with them hunting him down. But I was wrong about that. That's only like the first half of the movie. Rambo basically using, sticks and twigs and tree branches and whatever else he has on hand, creates a set of booby traps and manages to disable most of them and cause them a great deal of pain. And then he winds up surprising the sheriff, holding a knife to his throat and quoting Frozen. Let it go, he says. Let it go. He just wants to be left alone. I figured that would be sort of like the end of the movie, but actually that came fairly soon. And then they call in the National Guard. They call in, the weekend guys who basically work in the service on the weekend, and they come in there with their assault rifles and everything like that. They want to get this guy. They just want to go in there and get this guy, and they have no idea what they're dealing with. And then Rambo's former commander, played by Richard Crenna, shows up and tells them exactly what they're dealing with here. You've got a guy who lives off of the lands. He's endlessly resourceful. He's very skilled in combat. He can sneak up on you, and you'd never know it. And he'll take you all down. I'm here to, make sure that none of your guys get hurt. Not my guy. My guy can handle himself. I didn't really like Richard Crenna's performance all that much. I felt like he could have been a little bit more ominous, really tried to instill fear in these guys. But he just seems more boastful than anything. And the sheriff just kind of brushes him off and goes, we can handle it. We got 200 guys out there with weapons. What's he going to do? And of course Rambo, after they think they've killed him, he then steals a truck with an M60 in the back, and he drives back into town and starts blowing up building after building and cutting the power to different places. He's on a mission to, go to the police station and show Brian Dennehy who's boss. So there was a lot more action in this movie than I expected. Like I said, I figured it would just mostly take place he would escape the police station. I'd seen that bit on TV one day years ago, so I knew that was going to happen, but I just figured they'd be hunting him in the forest, and he would just take them out one by one, and that's how it would go down. Actually, kind of reminds me of Riddick, the third Riddick movie with Vin Diesel, how he's basically the main character at the start, and he's having to survive on this hostile planet. But then a couple teams of mercenaries come looking for him, and this point of view switches to their perspective as they're setting up base and they're looking for him, and he just pops out of nowhere and takes them out one by one. Very similar to First Blood, really, and where the main character essentially becomes like the stalker, Michael Myers that's hunting them down. And of course, John Rambo in this movie is a far more sympathetic character than, a masked slasher. He's very, very troubled, by his experiences. He doesn't have any friends or family anymore. His team is all gone, his squadron is all gone, and it's just him left with memories of killing people and being tortured in Vietnam, and he basically just wants to be left alone. He's like, I just want to be left alone. But they won't. They're like, no, we're going to get this guy. That's our job, and we need to do it, and they want to really badly get this guy, and it just creates a mess for everybody. This movie was directed by Ted Kotcheff, who I was familiar with mostly by his comedies. He did a lot of TV before and after his feature film career. Which kind of ended in, I think, maybe the early 90s. He did a movie with Tom Selleck called Folks, which I actually went to the theater to see because I'd seen a couple of comedies and I really liked him. Not a very good movie. However, he's probably most well known for directing Weekend at Bernie's, which is the Andrew McCarthy and Jonathan Silverman movie where they go to their boss's vacation house, basically, on the beach, and finding him dead, and they decide to pretend that he's still alive, make everyone think that he's still alive, so that, I forget the reasons why exactly. It's just sort of like a slapstick comedy. But prior to that, he directed a movie in '88 called Switching Channels. '88 is actually the same year, I think, that Rambo 3 came out. Switching Channels is a comedy that takes place at a cable news station, and Burt Reynolds and Kathleen Turner are the main characters, and Christopher Reeve is in as well. And I saw this movie pretty young, and I just loved it. I've loved it for a long time. It's this really high-energy comedy, very, very farcical, lots of people running around and talking rapid fire and just all kinds of crazy shenanigans. I've loved this movie for a long time, and that's how I knew Ted Kotcheff, is from his comedies. And so to think that he directed this hard-edged action movie, and to look at these two movies, if you take a look at Weekend and Bernie's, one of those other comedies, and take a look at First Blood, you never guess that the same guy directed both movies. They're completely different in tone and style and the look of them. First Blood's a very, the lighting is much more realistic. It's not bright the way most comedies are, obviously. Takes place at night, takes place in dark caves and in the forest and everything like that. And it's very, very competently made action movie. There's lots of great chases, and there's good shootouts and everything like that. I think probably the action highlight would be the scene in which he escapes from the police station initially. But my favorite scene was probably the one in which he surprises the sheriff and his deputies in the forest by popping out and jumping down on them and springing these traps on them. Some of them are pretty nasty, actually. But probably I think my favorite moment in the whole movie was the movie takes place over the course of 2 days, and once he really gives them a hard time on that first day, they gather up their forces and they gather on the National Guard and set out. They think they've got a fix on him because they had a radio conversation with him the previous night. So there's this shot of the whole a squad of them walking on either side of this creek, basically, as they head towards where his location is. And they all pass by, and then suddenly, as they pass by, Rambo pops up from behind some rocks and runs the other way. He just, is waiting for them behind some rocks, and then takes off in the other direction. It's great. Really, really great surprise. I laughed pretty hard during that. Stallone. The reason why Breihan picked this, I think, is because, it was a very important movie for Stallone, really sort of showing everyone that he could act, that he wasn't just some thug who talked kind of funny. And it's a real good performance by him. Like I said, I wasn't really big on Richard Crenna, but all the rest of the cast is really good. David Caruso has a small role as one of the deputies. Aside from that, I didn't recognize too many other actors, except for, Richard Crenna and Dennehy, of course. I'd seen Dennehy in a lot of different movies. So yeah, this is a very decent movie. Glad I saw it. And I really, like I said, I'm sort of tempted to go back and watch the other Rambo movies now in order. Since I've seen the first one, I sort of know what came beforehand. But I am going to see Rambo 2 for sure, because Breihan actually picked Rambo to for his 1985 choice. So in, 3 weeks I'll be talking about that one. But in the meantime, I've got to do a Jackie Chan movie called Project A for 1983. A movie I'd never heard of, but apparently it was like his big breakthrough. I thought it would be like Police Story, but I guess not. Project A. And luckily I managed to find the disc of that, which is lucky. I had no idea. I figured, I'd have to either, stream it or go to some obscure video store to find a copy of it. But no, it's at my local library, which is great. So I'll be doing that for 83, and his pick for 84 is The Terminator. Arnold Schwarzenegger in The Terminator, so that'll be fun. One of my favorite movies of the 80s. I hope you enjoyed hearing me talk about this, and if you've seen First Blood, I'd love to know what you think of it. Please feel free to comment. I don't get a lot of comments on these videos, but I'd love to hear from you. I've got a Facebook page you can visit. That's linked below. If you'd like to read Breihan's article on First Blood, the link to that is below in the description as well. And also I've got a playlist with all these videos on it, all the videos that I've done with this series, starting with Bullet in 1968. Thank you for watching. Sorry if this is a little long. I will see you next time with the Jackie Chan movie Project A. Take it easy.